The message came on a Tuesday morning. It was not sent through official channels. It did not arrive with warnings or diplomatic seals. It came through a cracked relay station at the edge of human space, barely functional, held together by outdated code and the stubbornness of a retired engineer who refused to let old things die. The engineer's name was Sarah Chen. She was 73 years old. She had worked for the United Earth Communications Network for 40 years before they told her the station was being decommissioned. She stayed anyway. Someone had to listen, she said. Someone always had to listen. The signal was weak, fragmented, buried under layers of static and cosmic interference. Most systems would have filtered it out as noise. But Sarah had spent decades learning to hear the whispers hidden in the void. She knew the difference between emptiness and silence. She knew when something was trying to speak. It took her 6 hours to clean the signal. 6 hours of filtering, amplifying, reconstructing. Her hands shook as she worked. Not from age, from instinct. The kind that tells you something is wrong before your mind catches up. When the message finally played, Sarah stopped breathing. It was a child's voice. A human child. The words were broken, frightened, recorded in stolen moments when no one was watching. The child spoke in English, but the accent was strange, shaped by years of speaking other languages. Other words. The message was short. 27 seconds. But those seconds contained enough horror to break the world. They were not alone. Humanity had reached the stars 50 years ago. They had met 17 different species, signed treaties, opened trade routes, built stations in neutral zones where cultures could meet and exchange. The galaxy had seemed vast but welcoming, cold but fair. The child's message said otherwise. There were farms, the voice whispered, hidden stations far from any mapped route. Places where alien species took human children, bought them, sold them, used them. The child did not explain how they were taken, did not describe the methods or the buyers. There was no time. The message ended with a location, a set of coordinates, and then a plea. Please come find us. Sarah sent the message to Earth Central within minutes. She bypassed every protocol, every chain of command. She sent it directly to the office of the Secretary of Defense. She sent it to the media. She sent it to every embassy and every military outpost humanity had established across known space. She made sure the galaxy would hear. The response was immediate and volcanic. Governments froze. News feeds exploded. Billions of people watched the message in silence. Parents held their children tighter. Soldiers checked their weapons. Diplomats made frantic calls to alien councils, demanding answers, demanding proof, demanding something that would make this untrue. The alien response was slow. Too slow. And when it came, it was wrong. The Galactic Council issued a statement. They called the message a hoax, a provocation. They said humanity was young and angry and prone to believing conspiracies. They urged calm. They urged patience. They urged Earth to let the proper authorities investigate. But they did not deny the farms existed. That silence said everything. Earth's military mobilized within 48 hours. The United Earth Defense Fleet had been built for protection, for defense. It had never been designed for war. But wars do not wait for readiness. They come when the heart has no choice but to fight. Admiral Zhao was given command. She was 51 years old, a career officer, a strategist who had spent 30 years studying alien tactics, alien psychology, alien weaknesses. She had always believed diplomacy was stronger than firepower. She had always believed understanding was the path to peace. She did not believe that anymore. Zhao assembled a task force. 37 ships, 15,000 personnel, engineers, soldiers, medics, intelligence officers. They were given one mission: find the coordinates, confirm the message, and if it was true, burn everything to ash. They jumped into deep space on the 5th day. The coordinates led them to a system with no name, no colonies, no stations on any map, just empty space and a dying star, but it was not empty. The station was enormous, hidden behind a debris field, shielded by technology humanity had never seen. It only appeared when their scanners pushed through the noise. When they stopped looking for what should be there and started looking for what was hidden, the station was not a farm. That word was too small, too kind. It was a processing facility, a hub, a marketplace, and it was full of children. Zhao ordered radio silence. No warnings, no demands. No chances for the enemy to destroy evidence or scatter. She deployed her Marines in total darkness. Stealth pods launched toward the station like stones thrown into still water. No sound, no light, just cold metal drifting through the void. The boarding took 17 minutes. The enemy was not prepared for violence. They had operated in secret for decades. They believed they were safe. They believed no one cared enough to look. They were wrong. The Marines moved through the station in silence. Magnetic boots on cold floors, weapons raised, cameras recording everything. They found the children in rows. Cages stacked on cages. Humans, yes, but others too. Species humanity had never met. Species the galaxy did not know existed. Some of the children were silent. Some cried. Some did not react at all. The Marines did not speak. They opened the cages. They wrapped the children in thermal blankets. They carried the ones too weak to walk. They moved with the efficiency of people who had trained for this but never wanted it to be real. On the bridge, Zhao watched the feeds. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes were wet. She did not look away. When the Marines confirmed the station was secure, Zhao gave her second order. Document everything. Every cage. Every contract. Every name. Every species involved. And then she gave her third order. Broadcast it. All of it. Every image. Every file. Every horror. Send it to the Galactic Council. Send it to every embassy. Every station. Every colony. Let the galaxy see what it had allowed. The transmission went out on every frequency. Unencrypted. Unstoppable. Within hours, trillions of beings across hundreds of worlds watched the truth, and the galaxy held its breath. The evidence could not be denied. Within hours of the broadcast, riots erupted on 14 different worlds. Embassies burned. Alien dignitaries were dragged from their quarters by angry mobs. Trade routes shut down as human cargo ships refused to move. The carefully built peace between species began to crack like glass under pressure. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. 37 species represented. Voices shouting over voices. Accusations and denials and demands for order. They met in the Great Hall on Centris Station, a monument to unity and cooperation. Humanity was not invited. Admiral Zhao watched the proceedings through hacked feeds. She sat alone in her ready room, the door locked, the lights dim. On her desk sat a data pad containing the names of every child they had found. 214 names. The youngest was 4 years old. The oldest was 16. Not all of them were still alive. The council debated for 6 hours. Some species called for justice. Others called for patience. A few called the entire situation regrettable but complicated. They used words like cultural differences and misunderstandings and isolated incidents. Zhao stopped listening. Her intelligence officers had been working without rest since the rescue. They had cracked the station's databases. They had traced financial records. They had followed the threads back through decades of transactions. And what they found was worse than anyone had imagined. The farms were not isolated. They were a network. Hundreds of stations. Thousands of operations. Spanning the entire galaxy. And they were not run by criminals or outcasts. They were funded by governments. By corporations. By the same species who sat in the council chamber and called for calm. Humanity had been fed to the machine for 30 years. The trafficking had started almost immediately after first contact. Human children were considered exotic, rare. Their emotional range fascinated certain species. Their adaptability made them useful. Their lack of galactic legal standing made them easy to take, and no one had said a word. Zhao compiled the evidence into a single report. She did not soften it, did not redact the names or the species involved. She sent it directly to Earth, to the President, to the Joint Chiefs, to every government that still believed diplomacy could solve this. The response came within the hour. The President's message was brief. 3 sentences, we see it. We believe you. Do what must be done. Zhao stood from her desk. She walked to the bridge. Her officers rose as she entered. They knew the look on her face. They had seen it before in training simulations, in war games, but never in reality. She gave the order, full mobilization. Every ship, every soldier, every asset humanity possessed. They were going to war, but not a war the galaxy expected. The United Earth Defense Fleet did not attack military targets. They did not strike at council stations or alien homeworlds. Instead, they moved like shadows through the network of trafficking sites. They hit 6 facilities in the first week, 12 in the second, 20 in the third. Every raid was broadcast live. Every child saved was shown to the galaxy. Every document recovered was released to the public. Humanity did not ask for permission, did not negotiate, did not stop. The galaxy reacted with chaos. Some species publicly condemned the trafficking and promised investigations. Others remained silent. A few threatened military action if humanity did not stand down. The Council issued sanction after sanction. They froze human assets, closed trade agreements, expelled human diplomats. Zhao ignored all of it. Her fleet grew larger. Ships that had been decommissioned were brought back online. Civilian vessels were retrofitted with weapons. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers. Retired soldiers returned to duty. Engineers worked around the clock to build more ships, more weapons, more tools for the fight. Humanity had found its purpose, but the enemy was adapting. The trafficking network began to collapse in on itself. Stations went dark. Operators fled. Records were destroyed. The species involved started pointing fingers at each other, trying to deflect blame, trying to save themselves. And then the attacks began. The first strike hit a human colony on the edge of explored space. A small settlement. 3,000 people. The attack came without warning, without declaration. Alien warships appeared in orbit and opened fire. The colony had no defenses, no military presence, just families and farms and hope. It was gone in 20 minutes. The message was clear. If humanity continued this crusade, they would pay in blood. Zhao read the casualty reports in silence. She read the names, the ages. She read the messages left behind by parents who knew they were going to die. She read until her eyes burned and her hands shook, and then she made a decision. If the galaxy wanted war, they would have it. But humanity would not fight like the galaxy expected. They would not mass fleets and clash in open space. They would not march armies across planets. They would fight the way humans had always fought when their backs were against the wall, with rage, with cunning. With no mercy, Zhao issued new orders. The fleet scattered. Ships went dark. They stopped broadcasting, stopped following predictable routes. They became ghosts in the void. And when they struck hard and fast and without warning. Supply depots exploded. Communication relays went silent. Trade ships vanished. The species involved in the trafficking began to feel fear. Real fear. The kind that comes when you realize the prey has become the hunter. But Zhao knew this was not sustainable. Humanity was outnumbered, outgunned, outresourced. They could hurt the enemy. They could make them bleed. But they could not win a prolonged conflict. They needed something more. In the depths of her command ship, Zhao gathered her best minds, strategists, hackers, psychologists, scientists. She asked them one question. How do we make the galaxy stop? The answer came from an unexpected source, a young intelligence officer named Marcus Webb. He had been analyzing the Council's response patterns, the way they communicated, the way they made decisions, and he had found something, a weakness. The Council operated on consensus. 37 species, 37 votes. They could not act without majority approval, and right now the galaxy was divided. Some species wanted to crush humanity. Others wanted reconciliation. Most just wanted the chaos to end. If humanity could shift the balance, they could fracture the Council entirely. Webb proposed a plan. It was dangerous. It required perfect timing, and it meant revealing a secret humanity had kept since the first rescue. The children they had saved were not just victims. They were witnesses, and they knew things. Names, locations, deals, secrets the galaxy had tried to bury. If those secrets were released at the right moment, to the right people, the Council would tear itself apart. Zhao listened. She did not interrupt. When Webb finished, she looked around the room. At the tired faces, the determined eyes, the people who had given everything for this fight. She nodded. Do it. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity did not forgive, and they did not forget. The broadcast began at 400 Galactic Standard Time. It did not come from a military channel. It came from everywhere. Every civilian network, every news feed, every public communication relay across the galaxy. Humanity had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Hacking, infiltrating, building backdoors into systems no one thought could be breached. When the message went live, there was no way to stop it. The screen showed a child, a human girl. She was 12 years old. Her name was Elena. She sat in a simple chair in a plain room. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her eyes were clear. She did not look frightened. She looked angry, and she began to speak. She spoke in clear, precise language. She named the species who had taken her. She named the facility where she had been held. She described the process, the buyers, the handlers, the systems in place to keep victims silent. She did not cry, did not scream. She simply told the truth. And then she named the council members who knew, species representatives who had received reports and ignored them, who had taken bribes to look the other way, who had personally invested in the trafficking networks. Elena listed them by name, by position, by world. She provided account numbers, transaction records, intercepted communications. She provided proof. When Elena finished, another child appeared, then another, then another. 15 children in total, human and non-human, each one telling their story, each one naming names. The testimonies lasted 2 hours. By the time the broadcast ended, the galaxy was in flames. The council chamber on Centris Station erupted into chaos. Species turned on each other. Delegates screamed accusations. Security had to physically separate representatives from different factions. 3 ambassadors resigned on the spot. 2 more were arrested by their own governments within hours. But the fractures went deeper than politics. The revelation showed that the trafficking had not just targeted humans. Every species in the council had lost children to the network. The operations had been carefully hidden. Victims chosen from populations no one would miss, orphans, refugees, the forgotten. Every world had been touched by this horror, and every world had been lied to. Public outrage reached levels no government could control. On the core worlds, massive protests shut down entire cities. Workers refused to return to their jobs. Transport systems ground to a halt. The economy of the galaxy began to collapse under the weight of collective rage, and humanity kept pushing. Admiral Zhao had not stopped her operations. While the galaxy burned with revelation, her fleets continued to move. They hit 3 more facilities in the chaos. They rescued 260 more children. Every rescue was documented. Every piece of evidence was added to the growing archive. But the enemy was no longer running. They were organizing. 5 species formed a coalition. Species whose governments were most implicated in the trafficking. Species who stood to lose everything if the truth continued to spread. They called themselves the Sovereignty Pact. They claimed humanity had gone rogue. That Earth was a threat to galactic stability. That force was the only option left. They mobilized their fleets. The Pact had numbers. They had resources. They had technology refined over centuries. Their combined military strength was 10 times the size of Earth's defense fleet. On paper, it was not a fight. It was an execution. Zhao watched the enemy fleets gather through long-range scans. She stood on the bridge of her flagship, surrounded by officers who had not slept in days. The room was silent. Everyone knew what was coming. Her second-in-command, Commander Liu, spoke quietly. "We cannot win this fight." Zhao did not look at him. She kept her eyes on the tactical display, on the red icons representing enemy ships, on the thin blue line representing humanity's forces. "No," she said. "We cannot. Then what do we do?" Zhao was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had stopped caring about survival and started caring about legacy. "We make them regret it." She issued orders. The fleet would not retreat. They would not scatter. They would meet the enemy head-on. But not to win, to delay. Humanity needed time. Time for the evidence to spread. Time for the galaxy to choose sides. Time for the Pact to make mistakes. The fleets met in the Epsilon Reach, a region of space littered with asteroid fields and dying stars. It was tactically neutral ground. No strategic value. No colonies nearby. Just empty space where 2 forces could destroy each other without collateral damage. The battle began at dawn. Human ships moved in formations drilled into muscle memory. Tight patterns, overlapping fields of fire. They used the asteroids for cover. Used the debris fields to mask their movements. They fought like cornered animals. Vicious, desperate, unrelenting. The Pact had expected an easy victory. They had expected humanity to break and run. Instead, they found an enemy willing to trade 1 ship for 3. Willing to sacrifice everything for small gains. Willing to die if it meant the enemy bled. The battle raged for 16 hours. Human ships fell one by one. Reactors breached. Hulls torn apart. Escape pods jettisoned into the void. But every ship that died took enemies with it. Every sacrifice bought minutes. On the flagship, Zhao coordinated the defense with cold precision. She moved pieces on the board like a chess master. She knew every move was temporary, every victory hollow. But she also knew the galaxy was watching, and that was the point. The broadcast of the battle went live on every channel, uncensored, unfiltered. People across the galaxy watched human ships burn, watched crews make last stands, watched captains ram their vessels into enemy cruisers rather than surrender. They watched humanity refuse to die quietly. Public opinion began to shift. Species who had remained neutral started to question the pact, started to ask why so much force was needed, started to wonder if maybe humanity was not the villain in this story. But the battle was still lost. By hour 20, only 7 human ships remained. The flagship was crippled, life support failing, weapons offline. Zhao stood on a bridge lit only by emergency lights. Blood ran down her face from a gash across her forehead. Her uniform was torn, but she stood straight. Commander Liu approached her. His voice was hoarse. "Admiral, we need to evacuate." Zhao shook her head. "No. We hold. Admiral, the ship is dying. Then we die with it." Liu stared at her. Then he nodded. He returned to his station. The remaining crew did the same. No one argued. No one ran. They had chosen this path. They would see it through. The enemy moved in for the kill. Their lead dreadnought powered weapons for a final strike. Zhao watched it approach on the dying tactical display. She thought about Earth, about the children they had saved, about the galaxy that had let this happen. She thought about whether it had been worth it. And then something changed. A new signal appeared on the scanners. Then another. Then 50. Then 500. Ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Ships from species humanity had never met. Ships from colonies on the edge of known space. Ships from neutral worlds who had seen the broadcasts and made a choice. They had come to help. The packed fleet hesitated. Their formations broke. Confusion rippled through their command networks. They had expected an easy victory. They had not expected the galaxy to intervene. The new arrivals did not attack. They simply positioned themselves between humanity and the pact, a living shield, a statement. The message was clear. If the pact wanted to destroy humanity, they would have to go through everyone else first. The pact fleet held position for 10 minutes. Then slowly they began to withdraw, not in defeat, but in recognition. The cost had become too high. The risk too great. Humanity had survived, but the war was not over. The intervention saved humanity from extinction, but it did not bring peace. The galaxy fractured into 3 factions. Those who stood with humanity, those who stood with the pact, and those who wanted nothing to do with either side. Trade routes collapsed, alliances shattered. Species who had cooperated for centuries stopped speaking to each other. The council dissolved. It happened quietly. No formal announcement, no dramatic final session. Representatives simply stopped showing up. The Great Hall on Centris Station sat empty. The symbol of galactic unity became a tomb. In the aftermath, humanity tried to rebuild. The fleet limped back to Earth. Wounded ships held together by temporary welds and prayers. She returned to a hero's welcome. Parades, medals, speeches. She attended none of them. She locked herself in her quarters and refused to see anyone. The children they had rescued were placed in rehabilitation centers. Doctors and counselors worked around the clock to help them heal. But some wounds do not close. Some memories do not fade. Many of the children could not sleep, could not trust, could not forget. Elena, the girl who had testified in the broadcast, stopped speaking entirely. She sat in her room and stared at walls. When people tried to help, she did not respond. She had given everything to the fight, and now she had nothing left. On Earth, the public mood shifted from rage to exhaustion. People wanted to move on, to forget, to return to normal, but normal was gone. Humanity had seen what the galaxy truly was, and they could not unsee it. The president called for reconciliation, for healing, for diplomacy with the species who had helped them. But her words rang hollow. How do you make peace with a galaxy that had allowed your children to be sold? And then the betrayals began. 3 of the species who had intervened during the battle reversed their positions. They claimed they had been misled, that humanity had manipulated them with false evidence. They rejoined the pact and called for sanctions against Earth. Then the evidence started disappearing. Records that had been released to the public were scrubbed from networks. Witnesses recanted their testimonies. Files were corrupted. The trafficking network, which had seemed so exposed, began to fade back into shadow. Someone was cleaning up. Zhao came out of isolation when she heard the news. She demanded meetings with intelligence, with government officials, with anyone who could explain what was happening, but she was met with silence, with excuses, with reassurances that everything was under control. It was not under control. Marcus Webb, the intelligence officer who had designed the information warfare campaign, found Zhao in a darkened conference room. He looked like he had not slept in weeks. His hands shook as he placed a data pad on the table. "Admiral, you need to see this." Zhao activated the pad. What she saw made her blood run cold. The trafficking network had not been dismantled. It had evolved, gone deeper, adapted. The species running it had learned from their mistakes. They had built new systems, new safe houses, new methods, and they were already operational. But that was not the worst part. Webb's investigation had uncovered something else. Someone on Earth had known about the trafficking before Sarah Chen's message. Someone in the government, someone high enough to bury reports, to redirect investigations, to ensure humanity remained ignorant. Zhao looked up at Webb. Her voice was ice. "Who?" Webb hesitated. Then he said a name she recognized, a name that made her entire world collapse. It was someone she trusted. The conspiracy went higher than anyone had imagined. Not everyone in the government was involved, but enough were. Enough to keep the truth hidden, enough to profit from humanity's ignorance, enough to let children vanish without consequence. Zhao felt something break inside her. She had fought so hard, sacrificed so much, and it had been for nothing. The enemy was not just out there in the galaxy. It was here, at home, among her own people. She stood from the table. Her voice was hollow. "Gather everyone you trust. Tell no one else. We have work to do." Over the next week, Zhao and her team operated in complete secrecy. They gathered evidence, built cases, identified everyone involved in the conspiracy. They worked from safe houses, used encrypted channels, trusted no one outside their circle, and they prepared to burn it all down. But before they could act, they were discovered. The raid came at night. Military police stormed the safe house. They arrested Zhao and 15 members of her team. They seized all evidence, all records, all proof. The operation was fast and brutal and efficient. Zhao was taken to a detention facility deep underground. No windows, no communication, just cold walls and silence. She sat in her cell and realized she had lost. The conspiracy would survive. The trafficking would continue, and no one would ever know the truth. For 3 days, she heard nothing, saw no one except guards who would not speak. She began to wonder if they would simply make her disappear. If that was how this story would end. Then on the 4th day, her cell door opened. Marcus Webb stood in the doorway. His face was bruised, his lips split, but he was smiling. "We did it," he said. Zhao did not understand. Webb stepped aside. Behind him stood a woman in a civilian suit. A prosecutor. She introduced herself and explained. Webb had anticipated the raid. He had hidden copies of the evidence in places no one could find. And when Zhao was arrested, he released everything. Not to the government, not to the military, directly to the public, to journalists, to activists, to every person who had fought for the truth. The evidence spread like fire. Within hours, protests erupted outside government buildings. Military units refused orders. Officials tried to flee and were stopped at borders. The conspiracy collapsed under its own weight. Arrests were made. Trials scheduled. The people who had betrayed humanity would face justice. But Zhao felt no victory. She felt only emptiness. She had broken the conspiracy. But she had also broken faith. Faith in her government. Faith in her own people. Faith in the idea that good could win. She was released from detention, given full honors, offered her position back. She declined. Instead, she returned to the rehabilitation center where the rescued children were staying. She found Elena sitting alone in a common room. The girl still would not speak, still stared at nothing. Zhao sat beside her. She did not say anything, did not try to offer comfort. She just sat. Two broken people in a broken world, and slowly Elena reached out and took her hand. They sat like that for hours, saying nothing, holding on, trying to remember what it felt like to hope. 6 months passed. The trials concluded. 17 government officials were convicted. 43 more across the galaxy. Assets were seized. Laws were rewritten. The United Earth Assembly passed the Protection Act, guaranteeing that no human child would ever vanish without the full weight of humanity coming down on those responsible. It felt like justice. It felt like closure. It was neither. Admiral Zhao did not return to active duty. She retired quietly and took a position at the rehabilitation center. She worked with the rescued children, helped them adjust, helped them heal. She did not wear her uniform, did not speak of the war. She became simply Sarah to the children. A woman who listened. Elena eventually started speaking again. Small words at first. Yes, no, thank you. Then sentences. Then stories. She told Zhao about the farm, about the fear, about the moment she recorded that first message and did not know if anyone would hear. She told Zhao she had not believed anyone would come. But you did, Elena said. Zhao looked at the girl, at the scars that would never fully fade, at the strength that had grown in their place. We almost did not, Zhao said. We almost looked away, Elena nodded. But you did not. That is what matters. Zhao was not sure she believed that. But she did not argue. Across the galaxy, the changes were slow but real. Species who had supported the trafficking faced consequences. Governments fell. Leaders were exiled. The network that had operated in darkness for decades was dismantled piece by piece. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to matter. Humanity's reputation changed. They were no longer seen as naive newcomers. They were seen as dangerous, unpredictable, a species that would burn the galaxy to protect their own. Some species admired that, others feared it. Most simply kept their distance. Trade resumed. Slowly, carefully, treaties were renegotiated. Embassies reopened. The galaxy tried to return to normal. But everyone knew the truth now. Everyone knew what had been hidden. And that knowledge changed everything. Sarah Chen, the engineer who had first heard the message, received recognition from Earth. They named a station after her, built monuments. She attended one ceremony and then retreated back to her relay station. She stayed there, listening to the void, making sure no message ever went unheard again. Marcus Webb continued his intelligence work. He became the head of a new agency dedicated to monitoring trafficking networks. He worked in silence. No public recognition, no awards, just endless vigilance. He told Zhao once that he would never stop looking, never stop listening, because the enemy had not disappeared. They had only learned to hide better. The pact dissolved after 2 years. The coalition could not survive the internal conflicts. Species blamed each other for the failures, for the exposure, for the losses. They went their separate ways, diminished and distrusted, but some of them did not forget. Some of them still believed humanity had overreached, that the price paid was too high, that someday there would be a reckoning. Zhao knew they were right. This peace was temporary, built on exhaustion rather than understanding, built on fear rather than trust. Someday the galaxy would forget. Someday someone would try again, and humanity would have to decide whether to fight or let it happen. She thought about that often. Late at night, when the center was quiet and the children were asleep, she thought about the cost of what they had done. The ships lost, the lives ended, the trust destroyed. She thought about whether it had been worth it. One evening, Elena found her sitting alone in the garden. The girl was 14 now, taller, stronger, still scarred but learning to carry it. "What are you thinking about?" Elena asked. Zhao looked up. She smiled faintly. The future. Elena sat beside her. She was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke. "Do you regret it?" Zhao considered the question. It was one she had asked herself 1,000 times. And the answer was always the same. "No," she said. "We saved you. That is enough." Elena shook her head. "You saved more than us. You made them see. You made them care. Even if they forget, we will remember. We will tell our children, and they will tell theirs. The galaxy learned something it can never unlearn." Zhao looked at the girl. "At the wisdom earned through suffering. At the hope that refused to die. Maybe you are right." Elena smiled. It was a small smile, fragile, but real. "I am. Because you taught me. You taught all of us. That we are not alone. That someone will come. That we are worth fighting for." Zhao felt something in her chest loosen. A weight she had carried for so long she had forgotten it was there. She reached out and took Elena's hand. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" for reminding me why we fought. They sat together in the fading light. Around them, the garden bloomed. Life continuing despite everything. Life refusing to surrender. Somewhere in the galaxy, the enemy still existed. Still schemed. Still waited. But here, in this moment, there was peace. Not the peace of victory. The peace of survival. Of endurance. Of people who had walked through fire and refused to be ash. Humanity had learned something too. They had learned they were not invincible. Not always right. Not always good. But they had also learned they were capable of extraordinary things when pushed to the edge. Capable of sacrifice, of courage, of refusing to accept what the galaxy told them was inevitable. They had learned that sometimes the only way to change the world is to burn it down and build something better from the ashes. And they had learned that children matter. Every single one. No matter where they come from. No matter how far they are. When someone cries for help, you answer. Even if it costs everything. Especially if it costs everything. Zhao stood. Elena stood with her. They walked back toward the center. Toward the other children. Toward the life they were all building together. It was not the life any of them had planned. Not the life they would have chosen. But it was theirs, and they would protect it. The galaxy would spin on. Empires would rise and fall. Species would thrive and fade. But somewhere, in a small corner of known space, on a blue planet circling an ordinary star, humanity would remember. They would remember the farms, the children, the war, the price. And they would never let it happen again. That was the promise. The vow. The reason they had fought, and it was enough. The stars burned above. Cold and distant and indifferent. But on Earth, in the garden, in the warmth of shared silence, there was something the stars could never understand. There was humanity, and humanity endured.